Test check.
Well, welcome everybody. I think I know everybody here. So excited to have Camille Pauley with us this evening. She is the co-founder and president of Healing the Culture, which is a nonprofit organization that evangelizes and converts people to be deeply, authentically, and permanently pro-life. She's the creator of multi-internationally acclaimed educational pro-life programs. In 2003, Camille co-founded Healing the Culture with Father Robert Spitzer, who's also a friend of mine, using his unique curriculum to change hearts and minds and building a culture of life. Under Camille's leadership, Healing the Culture has quickly grown into an internationally recognized organization with a powerful pro-life message, a wealth of successful products and resources, and tremendous influences in the cultural battle over abortion and euthanasia. So we'd like to welcome Camille this evening. So, Camille.
Thank you, Father. Good evening. How are you? Good. It's good to see you. It's good to be seen, isn't it? Yes. Tell me, raise your hand if you have heard me present on pro-life before. Okay. So about half of us. And was it only the 4 levels of happiness that you heard, or did you hear the whole 10 principles of pro-life? All 10 principles. Yeah. Okay. So about half of you have. That's good. So what I want to do is a little bit of the old and a little bit of the new today. I want to start with an old saying. There's an old saying that truth is stranger than fiction. And these last 18 months have certainly borne that out, haven't they? Yeah. In all my life, I don't think, in fact, I know, that I have never witnessed or studied or even read about a time, whether true or imaginary, that is weirder than the time we are living in right now. The degree to which so many people, millions of people all over the world, have so quickly and so easily given up their freedoms, their ability to reason, their sense of moral responsibility, personal responsibility, their moral virtue, and even their religious faith has been astounding to many people. And there's a lot of dialogue about that online. But equally important, I think, is the degree to which people in control of media, politics, medicine, entertainment have so easily and so quickly jumped to control, to manipulate, in many instances to lie for power, for prestige, for wealth, for opportunity, and in many cases have even betrayed us. There's a big sense of betrayal among so many people today, not just here, but around the world. And as I reflected about that and the topic I'm here to speak about tonight, there were so many coincidences. There were so many things in common, right? That there is such a betrayal of vulnerable human beings by those who are in power, the media, politicians, the medical establishment, the entertainment industry, right? That there's such a betrayal of the unborn, the elderly, people who are terminally ill, people who are disabled, by those who are in power. And so it almost seems like it was bound to happen, that yet another vulnerability produced yet another opportunity for those who would seek to control it for their own benefit. Certainly, the coronavirus has caused a great deal of suffering, but the response to it in so many ways has caused such a greater degree of suffering, economic, political suffering, personal suffering, emotional pain, religious, spiritual suffering and pain for so many of us in faith, who didn't have access to the sacraments for so long, and now we're just so happy to be back, seeing each other. And I think that the comparisons between the two have been very stark for me as I watch the dialogues evolving online. And this year, my family and I have two little girls. Juliet is 10 and Elizabeth is 7. And so this year was the first year we allowed them to watch Jesus of Nazareth. I don't know if you remember that. During the Lenten season, we watched it. It was made in the 70s maybe, or the early 80s, I don't remember. And it's a long mini-series about the life of Jesus all the way from his birth until his death, his crucifixion and death on the cross. And it's, 6, 7, 8 hours long. You have to watch it over 4 nights. And there's the one scene where Jesus is standing before Pontius Pilate. And it's such a poignant, well-done scene in that movie where Pilate is asking Christ, what is truth? And Jesus doesn't answer. And there's a reason why. Because Jesus' very presence in front of Pilate is the answer to the question. Right? Christ is the truth. He's the way and the truth and the life. And so his very presence, his mere presence in there is the response to Pilate's question, what is truth? But it's also, it resonates that Pilate is making not so much a question as a statement. Right? Whose truth? What truth? What is truth? Truth is whatever you want it to be. Right? The same moral relativism that caused all of this suffering through the death of Christ, the passion and suffering of Christ, is the same moral relativism that has led us to where we are today with the abortion issue, with euthanasia and with assisted suicide. And there is one answer to all this suffering. One answer to the suffering that's been caused in the last 18 months around our world from irresponsible decisions that were made, and even in many instances, I think, malicious decisions that were made. There's one answer to that, one answer to the problem of abortion, one answer to all the suffering that we face. And that answer we have in the palm of our hands as Catholics. It's Christ. It's the truth we hold ourselves in the Catholic faith. And for me, it's a cause and a source of optimism. It's really hard to be optimistic in this world today, isn't it? Really hard. And a lot of the people that I speak to, most of my talks are on Zoom. And this is actually my first presentation with live people sitting in the pews. I've been doing Zoom presentations for the last 18 months, and so this is really kind of exciting for me. But a common complaint from people is how scared they are about the future. There's a lot of pessimism. That faith has been lost, sanity has been lost, education has been lost, money has been lost, jobs have been lost, right? So much progress that we've made in so many arenas in the moral world and in the pro-life world have been lost. There's so much of a setback. And there's a great sense of despair, depression, I think, pessimism for the future. I don't share that. I have to tell you, I don't share that pessimism, and here's why. Because human nature hasn't changed. Now you may say, that's a really bad thing, right? But it's also a really good thing. Human nature hasn't changed. Human beings today have the same God-shaped hole in their hearts that they did 18 months ago, that they did 50 years ago, that they did 2,000 years ago, that they did at the beginning of time, or at least at the beginning of man's time. Human beings have a God-shaped hole, and that hole desires truth. And human beings will never be satisfied when they are being fed myths, lies, half-truths, and deceptions. They know they're being deceived, even if it's at least on a subconscious level. They know they're being deceived, and they're hungry for more. And our Catholic faith contains the truth that people need so very much. And so what I want to do today for you is to help you answer that question. How do I get optimistic about the future? Not just in the pro-life movement, but the future of our whole country and our world. How do I get optimistic? And how do I continue the fight? A second common complaint I hear from people when I'm speaking in my Zoom talks, especially among young people, college students, is how worried they are that our issue, the pro-life issue, has been pushed aside because of everything else that's going on. There's the racism issue, there's the coronavirus issue, there's the political issue, there's the Donald Trump issue, right? There's the, there's all these issues. There's riots and violence issues, there's unemployment issues, and with all these things going on, there's such a fear and worry in our movement that our issue has been pushed to the side, that you don't hear it as much anymore. The media has stopped talking about it. It's not interesting anymore, right? Other things have taken its place. That we're being silenced online, that we're being censored online, that our conversations have been closed, that so many speakers have been canceled, right? So there's this real sense of despair and pessimism that we've lost so much ground in the pro-life movement. And yet at the same time, you have to be very careful when you say we've lost ground. Because that same human heart, as I said before, still desires the truth. And we still have the same truth that we had before. We just need to create new ways and find different and new ways to teach it. So what I want to do today is give you a language. For some of you, you've heard this before, so this will be old for you, a little bit of a refresher course. And for some of you, this will be brand new. But I want to give you a language of how we can articulate the pro-life movement's raison d'etre, the philosophy of why be pro-life, to average people, no matter what their walk of life, whether they are Christian or not, whether they are young or old, whether they are our ethnicity or our nationality or of some other, whether they are male or female, no matter who they are. There is a language we can use to dialogue on the truths of our belief that come from our faith on why we are pro-life. That is the answer to the questions in the human heart, that empty human heart. And not just that, but I really believe that these principles that I'm going to share with you tonight are exactly what was missing from the dialogue that caused all these other problems in the first place. The problems with racism and rioting, the economic collapse, the fear-mongering, the power grabs, right? I really believe that the loss of these principles is what has caused that. And so helping to teach these principles is not just moving our pro-life movement forward, it's actually going to save our civilization. So how do you do that? Well, I can't just share it with you, I have to give you tools. So at the end of my talk, I'm going to share with you 3 tools we have that are completely free, that you can start using right away. A tool for older people, a tool for high schoolers, and now we have a tool for kindergarten through 2nd graders as well, which is really fun. I don't know if you've seen it yet, but I'm going to surprise you with some of that. So I want to go to the first slide, and I just want to share with you very, very briefly just a brief talk about what we call the 10 universal principles of civilization. Ordered in this way and articulated in the way I'm going to share it with you tonight was done by Father Robert Spitzer, who you may have seen on EWTN. You may be familiar with his Modges Center. You may have read some of his books. We have a whole bunch of his books in the back if you want to pick up some of them on your way out. You may know him from Gonzaga University when he was the president there for about 11 years. But he also wrote a book called Healing the Culture, where we get our organization's name from, and another book called 10 Universal Principles. And these 2 books are kind of like the underlying philosophy for the whole pro-life movement. And these 10 principles are critical to everything our church teaches in the moral realm, right? About moral virtue. Without these 10 principles, our sense, our direction, our guide towards moral truth collapses. Okay? So these are critical for you to learn. This is Viktor Frankl. He wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning. And in his book, he talks about his experience in the concentration camps in Nazi Germany. He was a Jew, he was a psychologist, and he was taken to the camps at Dachau. And he talks about how he observed that every human being needs a sense of meaning, a sense of purpose, right? And that without a sense of purpose, we literally die. At least without a sense of strong, transcendent, meaningful purpose, we literally die. And he talks about how in the camp there were 2 kinds of people. Those who grounded their sense of meaning and identity in the physical, tangible world, getting enough to eat, finding a place to sleep, avoiding the blows of the guards. And these people died. They gave up. They lost hope. They despaired, and they died. But there was another kind of person in the camp, those prisoners who identified their meaning in terms of faith and love, family, friendship, right? The transcendence, justice, truth, goodness, beauty. And they believed in those realities, in those transcendent realities. And those are the people who survived because they didn't give up. And so he reasoned, meaning is everything. And it's true in our movement, in our pro-life movement too. Our culture is dying. Politics is dying, right? Our establishments are dying. Our educational establishments are dying, right? And people are dying because they have lost a sense of purpose and meaning in life. So the first thing we do is we need to give them purpose and meaning. Now, many of you have heard this before, so I'm not going to spend too much time on this. If you could go to the next slide. You should skip that one. It's Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Let's skip that one. Yeah. These are the 4 levels of meaning in life. And every human being is going to choose one of these levels to live by. You're going to do it either consciously or subconsciously. And what we want in the pro-life movement is for people to consciously choose levels 3 and 4. So it's part of our job to teach them these levels and encourage them to choose level 3 and 4 and to show them why levels 3 and 4 are better than levels 1 and 2. Level 1 is physical pleasure and possession, kind of happiness that comes from the tangible, what you can see, taste, touch, hear, and smell. And it's good, you need it. But if that's all you seek, you will become bored, restless. You'll feel low self-esteem. You'll feel like your life isn't worth living. That's all there is. It's just linguini, and gold and, stuff. A thrill ride in the car, right? That's nice, but is there anything more to life than this, right? A good feeling, okay, a back rub, a sexual experience. We need more than that. Level 2 is ego gratification. It's deeper because it uses more powers, it's longer lasting, and it's more pervasive. It affects more people. It comes from power, control, right? Winning, succeeding, being better than others. And it is good. Right? It's good to have a sense of self-esteem. But the problem, again, is if we focus on it, we will end up feeling like we're living beneath ourselves. And if it becomes what we're living for, we will end up very aggressive, contemptuous of others who are less than we are, bitter and jealous of those who have more than we are, and constantly suspicious and fearful about the competition of life, where we stand and where we measure up. And so we need something more. Level 3 is good beyond self. It's the kind of happiness that comes from making a difference for someone else for their sake, right? Justice. Seeking justice for the sake of the good of the other. Beauty. Seeking beauty for the sake of bringing something into the world that inspires other people to be the best, the greatest that they are, to see the heights to which they could climb, to understand the dignity of their own personhood. Love, the desire to contribute to the transcendent sense of being wanted and desired, right? Doing the good for the other. So truth, love, justice, beauty, and home. The desire to feel like we are part of the totality, that we are included, that we are known, that we are understood, that we are home, that we're in family. Right? The kind of feeling you get when you really belong to a parish. You don't just go to a church, but you belong to a parish, and you know you are part of it, and you know you are loved for who you are in that parish. Right? Or in a home, in a family, or with a group of friends who have been friends for many years. That sense of home is very, very enticing. And level 3 is very good. That kind of happiness that comes from those 5 transcendentals is very good, but it's not enough. Human beings want it perfectly, absolutely, infinitely, eternally. Right? We want perfect justice and infinite beauty and absolute love, unconditional love. And we can't get that from each other. We will foul up. We will hurt one another. We will make mistakes. Right? We can't be absolute truth to one another because we don't have all the answers. We can't be perfectly just, not even with my daughters, because I don't know who had it first. So sometimes you just got to decide, and if somebody's going to say that's not fair. Right? And so we need level 4. Level 4 is the corrector of the crisis of level 3, that we can't be perfect love. It corrects it and says, well, you don't have to be perfect love because it's not you, but it exists as a reality beyond you there is perfect love and perfect justice and perfect truth and perfect home and perfect beauty. It's a reality in and of itself, and the reason why you long to be like it so much is because you are made in its image. But you make a pretty good surrogate for unconditional love, but you don't ever achieve it. And so when you try, people know, right? Your kid knows that you don't have all the answers, right? Or that your love is not truly, totally unconditional because you don't know everything your child wants and desires. My daughter will burst into tears when I try to solve the problem for her or fix something that's wrong because, no, you don't understand. And no matter how much I try to understand, I'll never understand, right? There's always something I'm missing because the depths of her heart and her soul and her imagination and her mind are so incredibly deep that I can't go there. So what she needs is God, right? That's level 4. Absolute, infinite truth, love, goodness, beauty, and home. Being fulfilled by that reality. Okay? So receiving fulfillment from that reality and giving back in turn in this relationship of love. Okay, that's level 4. So I've given a lot of talks on those levels in this parish before, and so have some others from my organization. And you can study and read a lot. I'll give you a lot of materials if you haven't learned a bunch about it so that you can see online for free. You can see a bunch of videos about that. It's a lot of fun. But here's my point. Our culture is very level 1 and 2. It's still got level 3 and 4 in it, but it's very level 1 and 2. And it's affecting the way we define every important cultural term that impacts people's understanding and beliefs about abortion and euthanasia and assisted suicide. Take, for example, how we define success. Success is defined as what? How do you see success being defined in our culture? Winning. Winning, being better than others, having more than others, right? Success is often defined in terms of the tangible, the physical, the material, and how much you have acquired, or in terms of the ego. Right? Very rarely is success defined culturally. Okay? I'm not talking about individual in your church, or well, my teacher is a great teacher, and she, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking culturally. Very rarely is success defined as the degree to which you give up yourself so that others might live, or the degree to which you abandon your own will and absorb and adopt God's will. Very rarely is that considered success culturally in our world. Right? But look at the destruction that it's caused. A child's going to be born into the world with a disability. He'll never have the opportunity to be successful, and so abort him. Never mind the possibility that this disabled child may have a unique capacity to elicit love and compassion out of us, or a unique capacity to see the intrinsic dignity and goodness in you in a beautiful way. How do we define quality of life in our culture? Quality of life. What is a high quality of life? Stuff. Having a lot of stuff, right? Enjoying fine wines, being able to live in a nice house, having everything on your bucket list crossed off. Right? That's a high quality of life. The kind of car you drive determines your quality of life. The kind of job you enjoy determines your quality of life. Right? The kind of clothes you wear determines your quality of life. Again, very level 1 and level 2. Very rarely does our culture define the quality of your life in terms of the quality of your gift to God. What is the quality of the gift you give to God? Is it filled with selfishness, with fear? Or is it filled with wild abandon for Him, trust in His love, acceptance of His will, acceptance of His commandments? Right? What is the quality of your gift to God when you give Him yourself? And so often people will say, oh, somebody with a terminal illness, only 6 weeks of life left to live, is going to have a low quality of life. And how can you force someone to stay alive with a low quality of life because of an illness that is causing pain, depression, loss of control, loss of the things he used to be able to do or the talent she used to have, low quality of life. And we so willingly accept that. Well, yes, this person will have a low quality of life, but we shouldn't kill people. Well, wait a minute. I would stop before you even say that. What do you mean that person's going to have a low quality of life, besides the fact that we shouldn't kill people? How do you know that person? How are you defining quality of life? Because maybe that person won't be able to participate in the sports that she used to do, or have control over certain bodily functions like she used to have, right? Or enjoy certain material pleasures that she used to enjoy. But if we all work hard and abandon ourselves and are willing to enter into her suffering, maybe she'll enjoy a quality of life she never knew before. A quality that comes from us accepting her, taking on her burden, assuring her that she is not a burden to us, but an opportunity for us to love, to be generous, to be compassionate, to step outside of ourselves, to serve someone else. That the person with a terminal illness gives us the opportunity to move out of levels 1 and 2 and into levels 3 and 4. Maybe if we gave people that kind of a sense of dignity and meaning and purpose, they wouldn't feel like they didn't have a high quality of life. But we are so quick to say, no, you're right. It's a low quality of life. But how do we define love? You often hear the phrase, every child a wanted child, by the pro-choice movement, right? Which basically means every child should be loved. What do they mean by love? How do you define love? How does our culture tend to define love? But what kind of happiness? What do you mean by that? Yeah, if you make me happy, then you love me, right? And yeah, that's the measure of it. If you make me happy, then you love me. And all too often, that happiness is defined as 1 and 2. Right? If you give me more stuff, or you tell me how great I am, and you don't notice, or at least don't point out any of my defects, my faults, right, my weaknesses, then you love me. But the minute you point those things out, you don't love me anymore. Right? Or the minute you don't let me do what I want, you don't love me anymore. You don't give me what I want, you don't love me anymore. It's really childish, isn't it? But that's what our culture has become. On a massive scale, adults are doing this, right? Oh, like you're going to say I can't do this or I can't have that. Well, you don't have. You're a hate group, right? That's a hate crime. Well, since when? What do you mean by love? Whatever happened to love being defined as the desire to do the good, the real good for the other, regardless of my sacrifice, regardless of what it requires from me? And what is the good? Now we have to define the good. Right? Is the good just level 1 or 2, or is it actually level 3 and 4? These levels of happiness are very important. When I say love is doing the good for the other, whereby it becomes just as easy, if not easier, to do the good for you as it is to do the good for myself. Do I mean just give you what you want materially, or give you ego gratifications, right? Boost your self-esteem? Because if that's what I'm defining as love, it is short-term. And it ends up really driving the person that you are loving into a self-despair. People have a God-shaped hole. They know the truth, and they know when they're being given half-truths. They know that's not enough. Even a child knows that's not enough when all you give them, the only way you show your love for them is by giving them things or telling them you're great at math or whatever, you're a great sportsman, right? They know that's not enough. But I want you to love me for who I am on the inside, a child will say. Human beings desire to be loved for level 3 and level 4. And suffering. Right? How do we define suffering in our culture today? We don't want it. Oh my goodness, if ever this has been clear, it's been clear in the last 18 months. Suffering, we don't want to have anything to do with suffering. The possibility of catching a disease that 99.97% of us will fully recover from is now terrifying. It's got a 6 feet social distance, wearing masks all the time, afraid to go out in public, afraid to give each other hugs. Now, I'm not saying that we shouldn't be doing these things to protect the vulnerable. I'm not saying that at all. But I'm saying, what has it done to our minds and our brains, right? You can see online these conversations where people are so terrified now of ever being normal again, right? We're so afraid of suffering that we've caused an even deeper kind of suffering. A suffering where we no longer see one another as human beings. We see each other as disease carriers. So what do you mean by suffering? Right? We could say that somebody who is disabled is suffering. Yes, of course. And we want to alleviate that suffering. And we do everything we can to be the arms of people who have no arms, and the feet for people who have no feet, and the IQ for people who suffer low IQ. Right? We do everything we can to be that for them because that's what compassion does. But we miss something when we say, as people who have to suffer have low meaning in life. Because if you really think about it, it's in the times of the greatest suffering when people traditionally have come together and learned love and generosity and compassion and gift of self and what really makes life worth living. Let's go to the next slide. These other categories we'll talk about in the next principles. I'm going to run through these principles really quickly, and then I want to address a particular issue attached to the conversation that we've been having, particularly on COVID-19, and then handle your questions and then show you some ways we can help you to evangelize. When you embrace happiness levels 3 and 4, it leads to something. This is really important. This isn't just interesting to talk about happiness, and it's kind of a neat idea. It's really important. People will define their entire sense of existence on which level of happiness they choose. Truth, love, goodness, that will all be defined in terms of what they think happiness is. Success, quality of life, all be defined in terms of what they think happiness is. But it will also lead to whether they accept or reject the 10 most important principles upon which civilization is grounded. If a person is living for level 1 and 2, they will reject every one of the principles that I'm about to share with you. If they're living for levels 3 and 4, they will naturally embrace these principles. Why? Because these principles are critical to keeping level 3 and level 4 alive in your life. Without them, level 3 and level 4 collapse. You need these principles. But not only will these 10 principles save civilization, they will also help people to become more pro-life. So let's look at the first one. Let's skip that. Principle number 1, the principle of beneficence, which originated in Jesus. Real happiness comes from giving myself away for the good of other people, not from sacrificing other people for the good of myself. Okay? That comes straight out of level 1, 2, 3, and 4 analysis. Okay? True happiness comes from level 3 and 4, not from level 1 and 2. Okay? So, I would never say as a level 3 and 4 person that you have to sacrifice your life in order for me to have more freedom, or in order for me to have more rights, or in order for me to satisfy my career goals. I would never say that. Because on level 3 and 4, I truly believe the meaning of my life is sacrificing myself for your good, not the other way around. Okay, let's go to the next principle. But then there are those who say, yeah, but the unborn child is not a human person. It's not a human being, right? So abortion is okay because you're not sacrificing somebody else for your own good. Okay? Well, we need to understand what a principle is, what a human being is. If we could go to the next slide. There are 3 principles to understanding the truth about something, what something is. The first is the principle of non-contradiction. You will also often hear people say, it's a person for you if you want it to be, but not for me if I don't want it to be. Okay? And of course, you cannot define reality by saying subjectively you can decide for yourself. Right? In the really real world, things either are or aren't. They can't be both at the same time. Contradictions can't be valid. Because if a contradiction is valid, then things don't have real substance at all, right? Things are made up. And we can't have conversation because every word you say, the opposite can be true at the same time. So we can't even talk to each other. We're like Plato used to say, we're like vegetables staring at each other, a carrot and a cucumber, with no thoughts in our head at all because they can't be held together when every contradiction is valid, okay? So we can't say it's a baby if you want it to be or not if you don't. A real being can't be both X and not X at the same time, in the same place, in the same respect. That means adhering in the same substance. So it either is a baby or it's not a baby. It cannot be both. By the way, you can teach this concept to kindergartners. We created a curriculum and tested it on kindergartners, and they loved it. They understood that it cannot be something and not something at the same time. It was really fun. I'll show you some of that in a minute. Next principle. So how do you know? Principle of objective evidence is the first way to find out what something really is. You study the evidence, right? You look at the objective evidence. You know you have a good theory or description or definition of something if it's based on publicly verifiable evidence, evidence that other people can verify. And indeed, we have scientific data that unequivocally shows that an unborn child at the moment of fertilization has the full human genetic code. Right? It is a being of human origin. It's existing, it's metabolizing, so it's a being, and it is of human origin. Right? The full human DNA is present at the moment of fertilization, and not just the full human DNA, because you have full human DNA, your full human DNA in your hair and in your toenail cells, but a unique, distinct, individual human genetic code is present in every unborn child at the moment of fertilization. It's not the mother's and it's not the father's. It's unique and distinct from them. So an individual being of human origin exists at the moment of fertilization. This is just biological fact. It cannot be ignored or denied. This was discovered in the 1970s by Dr. Jérôme Lejeune, who was a French geneticist. He was also the geneticist who discovered the gene that caused the chromosome, the extra chromosome that caused Down syndrome. And he discovered it. He used a DNA sequencer to discover the human genetic code present in the unborn child at the moment of fertilization. And if you don't believe him, you can create your own DNA sequencer and find out the same thing. It is objective evidence. Okay? But then people will say, okay, it's a human being, it's a being of human origin, but it's not a person. So let's go to the next slide. Not a human person. What do they mean by that? Well, a human person is the word we give to something that describes its moral worth and legal protectability. Okay? So we say you're a person. The law recognizes you as someone with moral worth and therefore legal protection. Okay? So why do we separate human being from human personhood? The pro-life movement says don't ever do that. If you have a being of human origin, you've got a person, someone with moral worth who should be legally protected. We've separated those words in the past, and every single time we've done it, we got it egregiously wrong, and we've had to apologize and, do all kinds of things to make up for the error that we've done and the evil that has occurred because of it. We've done it to women, we've done it to Jews, we've done it to blacks, we've done it to Native Americans, we've done it to American Indians, we've done it over and over and over again, and now we're doing it with the unborn. Watch out. What is a human person? This third principle, to know whether something is a human person or not, you have to look at the complete definition. A human person is a living being of human origin. So a human person has to be a human, okay? Because there are angelic persons and, there may be Martian persons, who knows, I don't know. But we're talking about human persons. A human person is a being of human origin which contains all the information necessary to guide its own development towards the actualization of its physical and transcendent nature. That means it's a being of human origin with human DNA that has all the information it needs to grow the way a human body grows and to actualize the 4 levels of happiness. Now, does that mean it ever will actualize those things? Maybe not. Maybe it'll get sick along the way, right? Who knows? Maybe it'll become corrupted along the way. But if it has the potential to actualize in that way, it is a human person. It is morally valuable and worthy of legal protection. If you try to put any other qualifier on the definition of a human person, has to have a certain IQ, certain athletic ability, certain wealth, right, certain political strength, you are going to introduce an arbitrary item into the definition, something subjective and arbitrary that has nothing to do with the moral worth of a human being. And you will once again exclude whole classes of real persons from the category. Okay? So if that's what a person is, which is the broadest definition that you could possibly get of a human person, right? Any being that has the potential to actualize physically and transcendentally in that way. Any being is a human person. If that's true, would an unborn child at the moment of fertilization be a human person? Yeah. Yeah, the single-celled zygote in the woman's fallopian tube is a being of human origin and contains all the information necessary to actualize physically and transcendentally in the way that human beings do. Therefore, it has moral worth and should be legally protectable. But then you have to get into ethics. What does that mean? What's my responsibility? There are 3 basic principles of ethics that have just gone thrown out the window on the abortion issue and thrown out the window in the last 18 months. Take a look at it. Principle number 1, the principle of non-maleficence. This is the most basic ethical principle there is. Without this one, you can't have any ethics at all. First, do no harm. Okay? The principle of non-maleficence. Avoid unnecessary harms, and if a harm is unavoidable, minimize it as much as possible. In 1973, when Roe versus Wade was decided, the Supreme Court justices basically said this: we don't know whether or not the unborn baby is a human person. We don't know. We're just judges. And so unless a time that you can prove it's a person, abortion has to be allowed. This was a fundamental violation of the most basic principle of ethics, which would teach you that if you don't know whether or not something is a human person, right, a transcendentally valuable being, morally valuable being, go ahead and kill it, right? That's what they said. Principle of non-maleficence says if you don't know, you have to err on the side of assuming it is and do no harm. Okay? But they turn this principle on its head. Go to the next one. The principle of consistent ends and means. This principle originated in St. Thomas Aquinas and St. Augustine, and it says the ends do not justify the means, which simply means that you cannot justify an evil method that you're using to get something done because the end that you're trying to accomplish is good. Right? So, in the case of my own children when they were younger, right? Elizabeth was trying to build a Lego set, and Juliet had the piece she wanted, which belonged to Elizabeth's set. But Juliet didn't want to give it up. So Elizabeth bangs her on the head, whack, 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 to get it back, right? That is the use of an evil means to achieve a good end. It's your piece, it's your Lego piece, you need to finish your Lego part. Juliet's being mean, she's stolen it from you, you can't finish your piece, your Lego thing without it. But to whack Juliet on the head in order to get your Lego is an evil means because the harm that you're doing is greater. It's a greater harm, and it will break the relationship, right? Juliet won't trust you anymore, and you could do damage to her body as well. Okay, there's all kinds of reasons. So you cannot use an evil means to get to a good end because the evilness of the method undermines the goodness of the end you're trying to achieve. Okay? So often people will say, well, we should use unborn babies in experimentation because cures to diseases may be found. But you cannot use an evil method. You cannot kill a human being in order to acquire the material that you need to bring about a greater good, like finding a cure for a disease. It's one of the reasons why embryonic stem cell transplant is immoral, because it violates this basic principle of ethics. And we're going to take a closer look at this principle in just a minute as it applies to the COVID-19 vaccines. Let's just go to the next principle real quick, the principle of full human potential, which originated in Bartolome de las Casas. And this principle teaches that every human being, by virtue of being a person, not for any other reason, just because you're human, every human being ought to be treated according to the full level of development, not according to the development he's currently achieved. What that means is your value comes from what you could achieve if you were allowed to reach your highest potential, which is your level 3-4 potential, right? Union with one another in total love and union with God in an unconditional embrace. You need to be valued. You have a right to be valued according to what you could achieve if you reached that highest potential. That's what gives you your value, your dignity right now. We should never value people according to what they have currently achieved. Number one, if we did that, every human being would have to be differently valued because we're all in a different stage of that race, right? But not only that, we're going back and forth all the time. You know, some days I'm at my best, some days I'm really impatient, right? Other days I do really bad things, and some days I'm really good, and other days I'm not. So how do you ever know how to value somebody? And not only that, but if that's what makes you valuable, the level of development you've currently achieved, then probably none of us can claim that we have a right to life, that we have a right to liberty, that we have a right to property, that we have a right to freedom. None of us could, because those rights come from our dignity. And how many of us can truly claim that I have reached my highest potential at every moment? Right? Okay. On the other hand, if we agree that every human being ought to be valued according to what you could achieve if you reached your highest potential, why then would we not value an unborn child equal to someone who has been born? Equal to the greatest pianist, equal to the most intelligent scientist, equal to the bravest soldier, equal to the most articulate politician. Why would we not value that little unborn child equally? Does he not have the same potential to reach the same levels of actualization as the rest of us do? Let's go to the next one. And of course, these all lead to the principle of natural rights, that because of your intrinsic dignity, every human being deserves, or it doesn't deserve, every human being in themselves possesses a right to life, a right to liberty, and a right to property, which, you know, through the Declaration of Independence is known as the right to pursue happiness. Okay? Every human being has these three inalienable rights. That means you cannot take those rights away from someone because you didn't give it to them. Those are rights that belong to them. You can violate those rights. You can violate them in malicious ways that are unjust. A government can sometimes justify the violation of those rights. Right? If somebody has committed murder, you can suspend their right to liberty as a way to protect the greater good, right? Or sometimes as a form of punishment. Okay? So you can violate those rights, but you can't take them away. That condition whereby a person is owed liberty still exists in a person even when he's incarcerated, which is why you can't lobotomize him, right? Or take away his religious practice, or prevent him from the intellectual pursuits, reading books, right? Okay? Because that condition, that duty we owe the other for liberty still exists. Why those three rights? Why are they natural rights? Because all three of those are necessary for your inherent natural dignity to be actualized. For your level 3-4 transcendent nature to truly be actualized, you need life, you need liberty, the freedom to choose the good of the other above the good of yourself, right? The freedom to move towards God, the freedom to move towards redemption, right? So you need liberty and you need property, right? You need to at least be allowed to acquire or be given the things that are necessary for you to survive, to not be an indentured servant. So those are necessary. Next slide. So what do you do when two of those natural rights conflict? Life against liberty, two natural rights. Now they're in conflict. What do you do? Well, the only way to resolve that conflict is to resolve in terms of the higher right. Which right is necessary for the existence of the other? That one would be considered more fundamental, and it should be protected first. So property versus someone's liberty rights, right? I have the freedom to own a farm, and I have the freedom to economically be prosperous, and so I'm going to own you as a slave to help me on my farm. Okay, well, the other person has a greater right to his freedom than you do to the property in your farm, okay? So his personal freedom over himself is greater than your personal freedom to own a farm, right? Okay, so your liberty interest is a greater right than your property interest, because liberty is a necessary condition for property, for the ownership of property. Freedom over yourself is a necessary condition in order to have stewardship over something else, tangible. Same thing is true with life and liberty. Life is a necessary condition for liberty. Without it, liberty doesn't mean anything. So if there's a conflict between liberty and a life right, life must take priority. And then the last principle is called the principle of limits to freedom, which originated in John Locke and Baron de Montesquieu, which says that one person's freedoms cannot impose an unjust burden on another group or another person's rights. So you cannot claim one new freedom, like the right to abortion, if it imposes an unjust burden on another group of people to have to die to accommodate your freedom of choice or your freedom of self-actualization. Okay? These are the 10 critical principles of civilization upon which the pro-life movement is based and upon which our whole civilization is based. And I want to apply it just really quickly to the COVID-19 question to make these principles more practical, more concrete, to show you how they apply, and also to answer a question that a lot of people have on their minds today. And then I want to hear your questions, and I'll show you some video. The arrival of the COVID-19 vaccine sparked a great debate and a lot of anxiety among pro-life people, and has caused a lot of anger too, and some really unfortunate tearing apart of each other in the pro-life movement. And I want to just try to offer some clarity on the COVID-19 vaccines. It is true that every one of the COVID-19 vaccines, the AstraZeneca, the Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson, and the Moderna vaccines, all 4 of the ones that have been approved by the FDA, are tainted by the cell line that comes from an aborted fetus. The cell line is called HEK293. It stands for Human Embryonic Kidney 293. There was one abortion that was done in the 1970s, more than 50 years ago. It was an elective abortion. The scientists did not perform the abortion. So, they weren't complicit in the abortion itself, and the abortion was not performed in order to provide scientific community with tissue or material. But they did end up with the tissue of this aborted child and used it in a series of experiments that they were doing to try to find a cell line that would proliferate and could be used in testing and the development of medical drugs and vaccinations and things. And it was the 293rd experiment that was successful. So that's why it's called the HEK293 cell line. It's very, very expensive to try to develop a cell line like this. It takes many, many years, many experiments. This one took 293 experiments, and it's very expensive. And so a lot of people say, well, why don't they just develop a new cell line without using an aborted baby so that we don't have this dilemma? It's very expensive. This cell line is very successful. It's proven to live long, to keep regenerating. It's very hard to get a cell line to continue to regenerate like this one has. And so it's kind of considered the gold standard, and to do it again is not very appealing to most, if not almost all scientists, except for a few pro-life ones who are trying to do just that. But it will take many years. So the question is, can you use a vaccine which is tainted by that cell line? 3 of these, I think, actually 2 of these, I forget now if it's 2 or 3. At least 2 of these, Moderna, Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson, and AstraZeneca, used the tainted cell line in the development of the vaccine. And the others, I think it was actually maybe just Moderna, just AstraZeneca. So AstraZeneca and Johnson & Johnson used the fetal cell line in the development. The other 2, thank you, Moderna and Pfizer, only used the tainted cell line in the testing of their vaccines. So the question is, can you use the vaccine, or is this the problem of the ends don't justify the means, and a problem of offending against the intrinsic dignity of the child who died in an unjust manner? I'm going to tell you what the church says and what the church allows. Okay? And I'm going to try really hard not to just give you my personal opinion. The church allows you to use vaccines that have been tested or developed against this tainted line. And there's a number of reasons why that you need to understand. The first reason why is because it's considered very remote. The cell line, you're not actually using they're not using the cells of the aborted baby anymore. That abortion happened 50 years ago. And these are cells derived from cells, derived from cells, derived from cells 50 years ago. So there is no matter left in these cells that contains body parts of the original child who died. Okay. So that would be number one. Does it contain the same DNA line? Yes. But it doesn't contain any body parts. Second common error that people make is they think that abortions have to be ongoing right now in order to continue to create and develop these vaccines. That's not true. There are no abortions that are happening to continue the development of this cell line, and no abortions are happening to create and continue these vaccines or test against these vaccines. Okay, they're using the HEK293 cell line. But there's something even more that the church wants us to understand, which is that not only is it very, very remote, but it's very, very common. It's far more common than you realize. Your participation in the use of the HEK293 cell line is guaranteed. The HEK293 cell line is used in testing and sometimes even in developing every single packaged and processed food available today. If you've eaten in a restaurant, then you've been exposed to the HEK293 cell line. If you buy processed or packaged food at a grocery store, you've been exposed. Every medicine, every vaccine has been tested, at least tested, if not used in development, against the HEK293 cell line. Every single cosmetic has been at least tested against the HEK293 cell line, if not developed using the cell line. What that means is that every one of us, if we are going to say that using this vaccine is immoral, every single one of us would have to basically stop eating at restaurants, stop eating processed foods, stop eating packaged foods, stop using all cosmetics, and basically stop taking every medicine known to man. That would be really hard to do. And so the church has told us, you can decide without feeling any guilt to take these vaccines. It is morally allowed. The original development of this cell line was immoral, and we need to make that known. But the church does allow you to take these vaccines and to use them without feeling any guilt whatsoever. At the same time, it's really important to understand that the continued use of these vaccines and these packaged foods and these cosmetics allows organizations like Planned Parenthood to justify what they're doing. And so we have a responsibility to speak out and to not only demand that a new cell line be created in a moral way, but to be willing to fund it, to fund that research. Okay. There's two articles, one by the Ethics Public Policy Center. This was written by outstanding Catholic ethicists, Robbie George, Carter Sneed. I don't know if you know these people. Some of them I know quite well. Ryan Anderson, who wrote this article, and we have copies of it in the back that you can take home with you, that explains this, the justification for using the COVID-19 vaccines. There's another article I also put out for you, which was written in the Public Discourse by Mark Perkins, wonderful article, which discusses these ethicists' findings and poses some, I wouldn't say an argument against it, but poses some challenges to us, mostly about how we can't ignore the fact that using these vaccines continues to justify, give the abortion movement a justification for what they do. And that is a conundrum for us, unless we are willing to really sacrifice time and effort and money to assist in the development of a moral cell line. And also, it's kind of interesting how many pro-life leaders have pointed this out. So many people have gotten hot and heavy over the COVID-19 vaccines without realizing that every single vaccine you ever take is equally tainted by this line. There's also another interesting thing in the Ethics and Public Policy article. I thought this was very interesting. They're warning us very strongly against making a distinction between the companies that used in their vaccines that merely tested against the cell line versus those that used the cell line in its development. because there really is no moral distinction. Since there isn't any aborted fetus parts in the cell line, and since no new abortions are happening, whether you're testing against it or developing your vaccine using it doesn't have a moral distinction. Now, some people argue, yes, but it has a biological distinction. You may be introducing in your body DNA that is very harmful to you. That's a completely different question, though. That would be about your health, your physical health. That doesn't involve your moral health. So you have to be really careful not to conflate those two. So anyway, I leave these articles with you in the back. I'd like to answer any questions you have. And before I do that, I just want to show you the quick clips that we have. It's 8 o'clock, so I know you want to ask your questions and go. We just have a few clips, a few resources for you that I want to make you aware of. We have a website. Our main website is healingtheculture.com, and on that website you can find a whole bunch of resources and tools. You can support us if you're able to. But we have other websites as well where you can get resources from. This one is called respectlife.university. Not .com, not .org, it's .university, respectlife.university. And up on this site, we load a bunch of videos that are 5 minutes long, 3 minutes long, sometimes 6 minutes long, that answer a bunch of questions. So, what about rape and incest? What about the life of the mother? What about uterine lavage? What about if a child is going to be born with an extreme disability? Okay, so if you want to see answers to short questions using these principles to help explain the pro-life position, or if you want to be able to share them with others or use them in the class you teach, this would be a really good place for you to go to do research. And I'm not going to show the whole video, but just to give you an idea, if you want to click on that one.
For years, opponents of abortion have warned that its legalization will lead to treating human beings as commodities. And in fact, legal abortion leaves us no alternative than to view the child as the property of its mother, something that can be treasured or disposed of depending on her whims. To see just where this mentality leads, take a look at the practice of uterine lavage, a technique for harvesting and selectively breeding humans, which claims to have advantages over in vitro fertilization. In a study sponsored by a reproductive genetics company from New Jersey, several dozen women in Mexico were paid $1,400 each to be artificially inseminated. After conceiving babies, their living embryos were flushed out of their bodies using a procedure called uterine lavage. Once removed from their mothers, scientists studied and experimented on the tiny living humans. Horrifying? Of course. But what's new here? Unscrupulous scientists have been manufacturing human embryos in petri dishes for years through in vitro fertilization.
Okay.
What's new in the Mexico study is that scientists wanted to see if they could artificially produce embryos.
Okay, so this is a really creepy, macabre subject that a lot of people don't know anything about, and I would highly encourage you to check out that video when you go home and learn about uterine lavage. But anyway, it's kind of like this is what we do in all the videos. We lay out the problem, and then we lay out a principle, and then we show you what's wrong, and then we show you an alternative. And we do that all in 5 minutes. So it's kind of like Prager University. Right now, we don't have that many videos in it. It's a little bit, it's kind of disorganized. You have to click on See All Videos in order to get all the subjects. You can't just look at the home page, but click in. But we'll continue to add more videos and update it. This next, I'm sorry, hold on a second. Because you're wondering what I'm doing. One of my staff members is trying to get in the office, and Arlo is going off. And I'm the only one who can turn it off. I just need to turn off the alarm at my office. Okay, there we go. Okay. There we go. There we go. Unarmed. Thank you for your patience. There we go. Little disaster there. This website is principlesandchoices.com. It's for high school students. And actually, I think, you're on healingtheculture.com. That's fine. There's another website called principlesandchoices.com where you can access our high school curriculum. for high school students. And part of it is a little play that we created. It's an audio drama, and you can download it for free on our Healing the Culture website, or you can purchase the whole audio drama. I think Margaret even has some in the back. But it's a drama between a girl and a boy in high school, and she's pro-life Christian and he's pro-abortion, and they're kind of having this debate. And through the play, they grow up and things happen, and you learn a whole pro-life theme, and you learn all 10 of these principles woven in a very creative, dramatic way into a play, which is a lot of fun. So we'll just play a little bit of the beginning so you can kind of hear what it's like.
Debates. For two students, Robert and Emma, they're about to receive an assignment that will open their eyes to a new and fascinating discovery about life.
In 2 weeks, you and your partner will be debating in front of the entire student body and your parents. It'll be like a political debate where the audience will ask you questions, and each of you will have a chance to respond. You've got until the bell rings to decide who's going to argue for and against the topic, and to discuss how you will research your topic. Go ahead, look at your cards.
Should abortion be legal?
You're kidding me. Abortion? Couldn't we get something like gun control or global warming? Well, obviously, I'm taking the pro-choice side.
No, wait a minute.
Oh, come on, Emma. As an every Sunday church girl, you're automatically pro-life.
I don't know anything about abortion. Like, how do you argue it?
I don't know. Just say it's a baby.
Look, they're all flipping coins. Let's do that.
I don't have a coin. You?
No. Rock, paper, scissors?
Rock, paper, scissors. You win. You choose.
I'll take pro-life.
For real?
What, you want pro-life?
No, but we just wasted time arguing about it when I already knew what you were going to choose.
Okay, sorry. So what do we do now?
I told you, just do what all Christians do. Say it's a baby. We don't need 2 weeks. Here, look, let's practice.
Okay.
So, let's say you're pregnant, and the law says you can't have an abortion. How will you finish high school, young lady?
It's a baby.
What if the pregnant mother is poor, has 50 gazillion kids, no husband to support her, and they have to drink boiled sock water to survive?
It's a baby. It can drink sock water too. That's gross.
What if the mom can't afford a bottle to put the sock water in?
Okay, now you're just being stupid.
What if it's deformed, or it's gonna be born with some weird disability, like it's gonna be a total retard or something?
You're a total retard, so you should be aborted.
Hey, Emma? That's not funny.
Oh, hey, Andrew. We're just joking around.
I know, but that's not funny. I have Down syndrome.
I know, Andrew. That's okay.
No, Robert just said. He said I should be aborted.
Say that.
Yes, you did.
Okay. So we made this audio drama, and as I said, it goes on and gets very involved and detailed, and you get to find out if Robert and Emma fall in love, and somebody dies at the end, and I won't tell you who. But that young man who played the character with Down syndrome actually has Down syndrome, and did a phenomenal job, and absolutely loved it. He spoke at our gala once, and we tested this at an all-girls school in New York. And the teacher said that by the end of the play, they watched it over a series of 4 days, or listened to it as an audio drama. By the end of the play in this all-girls school in the Bronx, I think it was in the Bronx, these girls were like crying and applauding. You know, they were so involved in the drama. Drama just brings out in people the emotions as well as the logic and the reason. And so it was a really good tool to use. So I encourage you to check that out. And the last one is a website called philoandsophie.org. Philo and Sophie, it's PHILO and Sophie.org, and this just came out on Monday. We just launched it. It's our K through 2 curriculum, and if you go online and you go to philoandsophie.org, you can sign in, you can register. It's all free. You get everything for free, and it teaches these principles to little kids as early as kindergarten. The first kindergarten unit is on happiness, the 4 levels, and the first grade unit is on success and how we define success, and the second grade unit is on contradictions. And each one of them contains several pro-life lessons throughout. I just want to show you a little bit of one of them so you can get an idea of what it's like and how we did it, and then I'll take your questions.
Boy, I sure love the fair, don't you, Philo? You get to see all the animals, ride on the carnival rides, and eat lots of cotton candy.
Oh, Frank, I do hope those judges would hurry up. I spent all day working on my exhibit, and I'm awfully hungry. I'm certain they will like my exhibit the best, if only they would hurry up.
What's an exhibit?
We're at an exhibit, silly. Remember? The judge asked us to decorate a table to show what makes us happy. See, your sign, it says,
What makes me happy? Oh, yeah!
shh, look, here comes the judge.
Let's see. What's your name?
My name is Frank.
Frank. Ah, yes, Frank the Monster. So, Frank, what is it that makes you happy?
Well, as you can see here, I have put a big bowl of spaghetti on my table. I like to eat spaghetti. Eating spaghetti tastes good and is fun, too.
Ah, that is a good kind of happiness, isn't it? And it uses our 5 senses. It tastes good, smells good, looks good, and sounds steamy hot.
And it feels good going down into my tummy. Oh, that's my friend Philo. He's a penguin. He's kind of hungry right now.
Ah, well, that's a fine exhibit. Thank you.
You're welcome.
You must be Philo.
Yes, and here is my most excellent exhibit. Of course, what makes me happy is winning. This is the trophy I was awarded for being the very best swimmer in my school. This is a medal I received when I won first place in the spelling competition. And here is a photo that was taken of me. I won a prize for having more beautiful flowers than anyone else on my street.
Wow, Philo, you sure are good at a lot of things.
Thank you.
You know, your happiness is a little different than Frank's. His was more about the happiness we get when our body feels good. Yours is more about the happiness you get when you're proud of yourself.
Yes, and from having everyone know how wonderful I am.
You sound a little hungry.
Yes. So, do you like my exhibit best?
Well, they're both very important kinds of happiness. But I'm going to see what these next 2 exhibits are about.
Oh, of course, of course.
Okay.
Hello, my dear. What's your name?
That's my daughter, Elizabeth. So I won't give the rest of it away, and in the essence of time, we'll stop there. But I just wanted you to get in the sense of what it is we did and how we did it, how we communicate to little ones. And we just had a fantastic crew, wonderful actors, puppetry. We learned how to do puppetry. We built a whole studio and a whole set. And my family is actually moving to Rapid City, South Dakota at the end of this month so we can open a second office there and a new film studio there where we'll have more sunshine to film outside. We'll keep our office here. And in fact, we're looking for a location closer to this parish. So keep us in our prayers. And if any of you are interested in volunteering at our office when we move the location to be closer and more accessible to you, we encourage you to fill out the form. Margaret, I don't know where Margaret is, but are you in the back? There she is. Margaret has a form you can fill out, and we can send you a link to these websites. We can send you a link to the 2 articles that I mentioned, and we can also send you information on how you can volunteer if you're interested. So she's got a clipboard and a form that you can pass around, and you can sign up your email. And then we'll send you an email also after that inviting you if you'd like to be on our mailing list and subscribe, and you can. And if you don't, then you won't hear from us again. But anyway, I wanted just to open it up to you for any questions that you have or comments on the vaccination or any of the principles we talked about, or any other questions that you'd like to see this applied to, or that you might, or comments you might have. So what are your thoughts? Yes. You know, that's very true. She's talking about the positive things that happen. There's also positive things. We focus on the negative a lot, and there are a lot of positive things that have come from this too. In my own family, it's been letting go of so many tangible things that we don't need anymore. You know, because we couldn't shop, we stopped shopping, you know, and you realize I don't need all this stuff in my life, and I don't need all this time away from my children. And there were many positive things. The question was what you chose to do with that suffering. Right? Whether suffering brings about a good or a bad, all exists in the choice. What do you do? What's your choice? Do you choose the good in it? Do you choose to look for the good in it? Or do you choose to see only the bad? Yeah, interesting. I have seen that too. The young people in their 20s are more scared of the disease than the elderly are. I have seen that. Yeah. 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 I don't know so much that they're scared of getting the sickness because they think they might die as much as they're scared of the sickness because it's just going to shut them down from everything that they need to do, or you know, they're afraid of a lot of them are afraid they might lose their job if they have COVID or if they test positive, or what it means about their relationships. I'm not sure what direction, but you're right. I have not seen as much fear in older people. Other questions or thoughts? Just curious, how many of you have been vaccinated? Yeah, some, yeah. Okay. How many of you are scared of getting vaccinated? I know some people have been very scared, yeah. Very scared of getting vaccinated, yeah. How many of you have an opinion about the vaccinations? You're not sure yet, yeah. Okay. Yeah. 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 Division, yeah. 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 It makes me think a lot of, she's talking about the division that this has caused in people. It makes me think a lot about that Dr. Seuss book where the guy comes to town with the machine and it can put a star on your belly. And so some people have the star on their belly and some don't. And now there's this big division. And so everybody wants the star. But then once everybody has the star, then suddenly people want to get rid of the star so they're different. And it just causes this division that, you know, somehow you're better than other people. There's another book by Max Lucado called You Are Special, and it's about how you give out dots, you know that one, dots and stars based on whether you're good or bad, and so people divide. We always find ways to divide, don't we? The vaccinated versus the unvaccinated, the maskers versus the unmaskers, you know? I mean, the people with the BLM sign on their lawn and the people who don't, you know? It's very interesting how divided. And I don't know, this is my own opinion. I don't know that I can say that we haven't always been this divided. I just think it's all bubbling up now. There's lots of reasons for it to come out. I wonder if this is, for me, I just think this is a cancer that has been brewing for a long time. And, you know, COVID just gave it the opportunity to just bubble out. But we need to be the solution to it. We need to be the light. Yeah. Anybody else? Any other thoughts? Yeah. Yeah, I understand. Did you hear what she said? Yeah. Yeah, I don't know how you come back from something like this easily. I don't know. I think the church has to be responsible, very responsible for bringing people back to seeing the intrinsic dignity in one another and not seeing each other as germs and disease carriers. It's going to, of course. We could have handled this a lot better, I think, yeah. When we react out of fear and hubris, that's always when the worst things happen. And there was too much fear and too much hubris, I think, yeah. And greed. People capitalizing on the fear for greed, yeah. And as always, it's going to take the church to bring us back, I think. There is no other way to bring us back. It's going to take the church, yeah. But again, that's good news, because we are the church, right? This is our time. We were, and I want you to remember and feel encouraged by this. God knew this was going to happen, and he raised you up for a time like this because he trusts you. He trusts you with his message. That's pretty awesome, right? That's pretty awesome that he wants me to be here at this time to be part of this solution at what is arguably the weirdest time in human history. Yeah, if I can call it that. Anybody else wanting to comment? Yeah. 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 You're really right. I don't think we know the extent of the psychological damage that has been done to most of us because of this. You know, I think when the masks come down, the fear and the hesitation and the doubt that you're going to have, I think people are going to, I think the obsessive compulsions are going to be off the charts. They already are in young people. I had to take a family member, a young family member, to the doctor because of obsessive compulsive disorder, which was very bizarre in this particular family member. And he just said all of the symptoms of this person are off the charts in young people today. The obsessive compulsive disorder is off the charts, and he says, he's a pediatrician, he says he believes it's all COVID caused because these kids can't go anywhere without seeing everybody in masks and wash your hands and stand 6 feet apart. And it's terrifying. And many of them who would have been 2 or 3 years old when this started, who were just starting to get aware of the world, entered a world where this is natural and normal, and it's all they can remember now. And it's affected them in very strange ways. And you've got a lot of these kids. He says some of it manifests physically, where they're afraid of germs and are washing all the time, constantly washing raw, which was the case in this person. But another manifestation is sin. These kids will think that they're sinning all the time because they feel dirty, and that if they're religious, they interpret it as dirty spiritually as well. And so they constantly think they're sinning, have to go to confession, have to constantly ask their mom, is this a sin? Is this wrong? I touched the bottom of my foot, did I sin? Right? Or I touched the light switch before I washed my hands, and so I got the light switch dirty, so now it's going to kill somebody else. Was that a sin? So it's yeah, It's going to take a lot to recover from this. Yeah. And I don't think even after people lose the masks and everyone's vaccinated, I think we'll just start to see a lot of the psychological damage. I'm sure I've been psychologically, emotionally damaged in ways that I don't even know about because of this. You know, if you all were to take off your masks right now, I'd probably, you know, I don't know if you're freaking out about me, but, you know, yeah. You have a mouth, go away. You know? Yeah, good. Okay, well, I'm happy to stick around and answer any questions. Margaret's in the back. Please pick up materials. We have a big stack of these sheets of paper called, I think it's called 10 Universal Principles that have all those principles listed. I'd love it if you each just took a big handful of those that you can pass out to others and share with others. We just would be glad if the whole stack was gone, and that's how a beginning way that you can evangelize others is to share that handout with friends and family and everybody you know. Okay? And again, don't forget to sign that sheet if it hasn't gone around, if you want us to send you the links to the 2 COVID articles, the links to these 3 websites, and invite you to participate if you are so inclined in our ministry. Okay?